When people say a game is difficult, what do they actually mean? And what is the difference between a fair and an unfair challenge? This video will be about a lot of things, but mainly about game difficulty, punishment, and fairness. Yeah, I'm gonna die. This is World of Warcraft Hardcore. It's basically World of Warcraft as it was 20 years ago before any expansion packs, group finders, or major quality of life updates, but with one important difference: permadeath. If you die in World of Warcraft Hardcore, you die in real life.
When you poop in your dreams, you poop for real.
Your character will die. You can't interact with other players, you can't offload your items or gold through the mail, can't be brought back to life. Game over, try again. Hardcore started as an add-on on classic servers with players deleting their characters after they died, something people were also doing back in the day during vanilla, with challenges like Iron Man, which requires you to level 60 without dying while only wearing poor or common quality items. When Blizzard saw the popularity of the Hardcore add-on, they decided to add dedicated Hardcore rules servers in 2023. They later also added a self-found option which disables trade, in-game mail, and using the auction house for an even bigger challenge. The main draw of World of Warcraft Hardcore is its punishing nature because, if we're being honest, it's not really a difficult game. It requires strategy and patience, but not that much skill. Sure, more skillful players have an easier time maneuvering out of bad situations, but if you're able to avoid bad situations altogether like caves, then you need less combat and mechanical skills. And avoiding bad situations is more about game knowledge than anything else. But what does difficulty mean? And what does it mean to be good or bad at a game? Aren't situational awareness, strategy, and patience also skills?
Not enough
They're everywhere.
More raid.
Can only mechanically difficult games be called difficult games? Punishment, like losing the character you spend hours on, is the same for every player. But difficulty and skill definitely aren't universal. World of Warcraft isn't an easy game or a difficult game. There are different difficulties for almost every activity, and the different activities have different skill sets. It's not about straightforward mechanical skills, which you still need by the way for all those swirlies, but it's also about game knowledge and experience with encounters. It's true for both hardcore and modern World of Warcraft. The more you know, the easier it becomes. When people say a game is difficult, they usually mean games that are mechanically difficult, games that require quick reactions and or quick thinking with quick reactions. Action games. World of Warcraft, while it can be very challenging, is still a tap target game. Yes, you still need to press your attacks, move out of the way of danger, do the mechanics of the fight, but if you're targeting your target, you're attacking them. When people talk about difficult games, they usually mean games like Elden Ring. But is that universally true? Is this a difficult game for everyone? I mean, obviously not. If you have more experience with Souls-like games, it's easier to pick them up. While they might be difficult, they really aren't all that punishing. Making mistakes and seeing the "you died" screen is part of the appeal of a Souls-like game. And I know what you're thinking, oh, but still, you lose all your currency and progress when you die. You have to kill all those monsters again. Well, worst case, you can't even retrieve your souls because you died before you got to them. And this is what kept me from experimenting in Elden Ring for a long time, because I was afraid to be punished by death. Okay. But honestly, the currency doesn't even matter that much, and especially later when you figure out ways to farm it safely and efficiently. It's super frustrating dying halfway to a boss on a decent try, but that's the thing about making mistakes. You learn from them. Sometimes not immediately, but you eventually get better and better until suddenly you've killed the boss or cleared that level. That's the core appeal of Souls-like games. If they were easy, they'd be a lot more boring. But because you have to work for it and actually get better, when you do finally beat a boss, it actually feels like triumph. There's a level in Celeste where I died over 1200 times. I hyperbolically guessed it was about 1200. I think I died like 1200 times. And yeah, I wasn't even exaggerating. Celeste is a platformer with some pretty challenging sections because you need to be near pixel perfect with your jumps to make it through. As someone who was never really good at platformers and is still very traumatized from the Lion King and the Aladdin games, I had a hard time adjusting to Celeste at first. But unlike the platformers from my childhood, Celeste doesn't punish your mistakes at all. Games like Elden Ring or Dark Souls feel slightly more punishing because they set you back a little bit, but dying in Celeste means respawning in the same place you started. This means you can keep trying, seeing slow improvements, and eventually mastering longer and longer sections until you complete the level. Contrast that to a game like World of Warcraft Hardcore or something like Don't Starve, where a single mistake can cost hours and hours of progression. Not only can the experience be very frustrating, but it's hard to learn from your mistakes when there's a lot of time between you and the mistake every single time. When you die in Celeste, you can immediately try again. Even in Souls-like games, you usually respawn close to where you died. Oh, you died because you didn't know the boss had 4 consecutive attacks instead of 3? Well, now you know and you can try again. And learning and improving is fun. Failing and becoming better and better is what games are essentially all about. When a game punishes you with something like permadeath or a massive setback, even if it's not a difficult game, it becomes harder to learn. Say you die to, I don't know, random example, these kobolds in Elwynn Forest. Well, now you know to avoid caves and mines. And an hour later, when you're level 6 again, you will definitely know not to do that quest by yourself. But then, another few hours later, you run into another dangerous quest or situation and you die. Again. Well, now you've got to start over and it's going to take you 16 hours before you're here again. My mage, Malarkey, died at level 26 when I got too close to a horde camp accidentally. And I didn't realize those classic aggro ranges were about twice as big as they are in the modern game. Whoops, 1 day and 20 hours of playtime gone. Try again. The point is that while difficulty is different for everyone, games that are difficult but fair in how they treat failure will make it easier for players to get into a flow state and learn and improve. In order to get into the flow state, the difficulty needs to be not too easy, not too hard. You need to be able to be engrossed in what you're doing without feeling the difficulty is unfair or oppressive, but if it's too easy, you will become bored. Gaming is an interesting form of entertainment because it puts the player in a situation where they kind of want to fail. You want a challenge to overcome. Having said that, this mostly applies to games where skill is a major factor. When we're talking about cozy games or even some RPGs, the enjoyment is more based on time investment, effort, or luck. But what makes a game fair or unfair? Is a punishing game unfair? Is difficulty always fair? Well, in the case of punishing games and games that rely on skill, mechanical or otherwise, feeling a game is fair or not depends on what happens in the game is always the result of the player making a mistake or of the player being successful at the game. What I mean by that is, sure, Elden Ring is mechanically a difficult game, but it's also a fair game because I know that if I get hit, I made a mistake. I was in a place where I shouldn't have been, or I timed my dodge wrong, and I can try again relatively quickly. Knowing that the only thing standing between me and killing the boss is my own skill makes the game fair and also allows me to get into a flow state and improve over time. Punishing games with permadeath and roguelikes need to be even more fair. If a single lapse of judgment can kill hours of progress, it needs to be your fault always. However, this isn't always the case. There have been several incidents of people losing their character in World of Warcraft Hardcore due to a disconnect. When you log out of World of Warcraft and you're not in a rested, aka safe area, the game takes 20 seconds to log you out of the server. If in that time you get attacked or were already under attack when your character got disconnected, you 100% lost your character and its progress. In the early days of Hardcore, to balance out the amount of players on the server, a lot of areas were also hyper-spawning enemies, and those enemies also have a massive aggro range, so a lot of players got absolutely destroyed by respawning enemies and closing them. I will say that the one thing that punishing games have that difficult but non-punishing games don't have is stakes. When I played Aladdin or The Lion King as a child or even Crash Bandicoot later, I knew that no more lives meant game over, and that makes the experience really, really tense. Yes, it is frustrating dying on a boss in Elden Ring when you know you nearly killed him, or when you keep dying to the same mechanic in a Delves Challenge or Mage Tower in modern World of Warcraft. Uh-oh. But you know you can keep trying until you eventually get it. The second of frustration doesn't disrupt your flow completely, and the stakes are relatively low. But walking through a sketchy area in World of Warcraft Hardcore or platforming in The Lion King on one life feels like actual life and death. For this video, I went back to Hardcore for the first time since 2023, and I noticed that while the combat is very slow and kind of boring compared to the modern game, there's tension in every moment. Even walking around was filled with tension and felt super immersive. Every moment was filled with danger. Every moment I could lose my character. And then I died. Was that fair? Yeah, because I underestimated the danger of the Fargo Deep Mine and I wasn't patient or strategic enough. My punishment for underestimating the first slightly challenging area of the game was the death of my character. So what makes a game fair? And how do punishment and difficulty relate to it? Difficulty is different for everyone and not tied to one skill. You can be mechanically amazing at timing dodges, but struggle with strategy games like Civilization or games that require a lot of knowledge, like World of Warcraft, especially PvP. If a game is fair or not has more to do with how much control you have over your failure, especially if the punishment is severe. In games like Elden Ring, Cuphead, Celeste, the difficulty is always the same, but but that's because the skill lies in being able to detect a pattern and execute on it with as few mistakes as possible. This also becomes easier as you become more skilled at the game. In games like World of Warcraft or even Balatro, the endless scaling will make the challenge harder and harder until it becomes literally mathematically impossible. For those unfamiliar with World of Warcraft Endgame, Mythic Plus is a system where dungeons infinitely scale in difficulty. The higher the key level, the stronger the enemies become. At key level 15, enemies are 280% stronger than at base mythic level, on top of other difficulty modifiers like a longer penalty for dying. Every key level is less and less forgiving of mistakes because the damage quickly becomes overwhelming. While player skill and gear can offset a lot of the damage and increase enemy health, there comes a point where it becomes impossible to climb higher. I mean, Blizzard has literally turned climbing the highest possible key into a competition with a very questionable name. I mean, the Great Push? Really?